Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, what better way to celebrate Easter than to talk about a movie with an invisible 6-foot rabbit? Britt and I discuss Harvey because the way Elwood acts is instructive for those of us who believe we walk around with an invisible God beside us. How can we tangibly experience the presence of an unseen God? And what impact would that have on the way we see life and treat other people? For years, I was smart. I prefer pleasant. You may quote me. Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me from Atlanta in his office, Britt Mooney. Hey, Britt, how you doing, man?
Doing well. My office is the kitchen. Yes, my office. Yes, I'm doing well, man. God is good.
Britt's office is wherever he happens to be at the time.
Wherever I land.
It could be a coffee shop. It could be a brewery. It could be anywhere. It could be a Chick-fil-A.
It could be. It's usually the coffee roastery or my house. Sometimes it's a coffee shop if I'm out somewhere else.
So at the end of 22, I texted you. I said, Britt, give me a list of like your top 5 movies. Cause dude, you're always complaining about the movie. You complain because I did Lord of the Rings, Empire Strikes Back. You're like, and I think we're going to look at doing a revisiting series for some of these movies that you might want to talk about. And I said 5, right? And you sent me, I think I said 5. I might have said 3 to 5. Okay. And I believe I got 12 out of you.
Yeah, you got 12. But
this is definitely the oldest movie on the list
that I gave you. We've done It's a Wonderful Life, which is older, but this is the oldest of that list. Yeah.
Right. So why is this movie, what sort of stuck out to you when I said, hey, tell me about these movies you want to do? Why did you want to do a movie about a dude who has an imaginary rabbit that is 72 years old? Not the rabbit, the movie is 72 years old.
The rabbit's supposed to be really old too, but
the rabbit's probably older.
Harvey was one of my favorite movies growing up. As I've talked about before, I was fortunate with part of my growing up was my dad on Saturday afternoons or Sunday afternoons saying, Britt, come here and watch this movie. Because it would come on, it would be these old movies and they would come on TBS or whatever, show, whatever channel it was on, local television. And they would show old movies. And, my uncle was definitely a movie buff. And my dad, was as well. And so he would always be like, you got to watch this movie. And so I watched a lot of old movies, and I never had a problem with black and white. I never had a problem with older movies, and maybe they don't translate as well as they used to, like with cell phones and some of the technology nowadays. I think maybe it's harder for some of these movies to translate to people who are younger, but Harvey was one of those movies that I was introduced to, and I just fell in love with it. And it's based on a Pulitzer Prize winning play. I mean, so it's an incredibly well written, play and movie. And the writer, Mary Chase, she was involved in the screenplay as well. And it's classic. It's got some classic character actors, and of course Jimmy Stewart. But I even saw the play when I was younger. Probably middle school.
You're not that old.
I didn't see the original. You may
have just turned 50, but you didn't see this when it was like on Broadway.
But on at a local theater. I think it was in Montgomery, Alabama, and because my my mom loved the movie, and we went to see the play. She took me to go see the play, and it was awesome. And so it's always one of those movies that always stuck out to me. And it's also one of those movies that as I've gotten older, I appreciate the sentiment within it. I appreciate the theme within it. And, sometimes I like to just pick a movie when we do these things where it's like, I don't even know what I'm going to get out of it. Like, I don't know. Let's do Replacements. It's
like a challenge.
It's like a challenge, like God's in it. God's in the story, and let's find him. And that's always fun. But Harvey is one of those that I always go back to because I think the theme of the invisible friend and how he acts, how Elwood, the Jimmy Stewart character, acts in the movie is so Christ-like. And yet it's done in such a creative way. It's not a Bible story, right? It's not a cheesy Christian movie. Right. They're not all cheesy, but a lot of them are. It's magical, it's mystical, and it's funny. And yet I think the theme in it is very Christ-like. And so when you ask me, like, man, what are some ones that it's like, man, if these are the ones I always go back to. So that's what a lot of those movies are that I gave you. It's like, these are the movies that I always go back to as movies of inspiration and great messages.
For those of you unfamiliar with the plot, so Jimmy Stewart is the main character, Elwood P. Dowd, and he's apparently written as like a 35-year-old alcoholic who has an imaginary invisible rabbit, 6 foot 3.5 inch tall rabbit named Harvey. Basically, his sister and niece who live with him, they get frustrated at the repercussions because, back in the 50s, somebody who was crazy, somebody who had an invisible friend that they talked to and bought drinks for and all this, was kind of a social pariah. So they were social outcasts in their small town. And so the sister Vita, who she actually won like an Academy Award for her performance.
So good.
Played by Josephine Hull.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, Jimmy Stewart actually said her performance was much more difficult because she had to both act like she believed in Harvey and she didn't believe in Harvey. Like, she had to, because there's that tension where she didn't believe in him, but she's actually seen him a couple times, as she expresses in the movie. And so as movies from this age tend to do, she wants to get Elwood committed to the insane asylum, and hijinks ensue. And then ends up, everything kind of works out at the end. And that's pretty much the sum of the movie. You can check it out. It's on Amazon. If you want to watch a ton of commercials, it's on this Fossum app. That's how I did it. But I mean, there's not a lot of plot points in this because it's generally, I mean, it's a 1950 movie. It's an older movie, slower paced. But the story and the acting is just phenomenal. You know how it reminded me of Tom Hanks in Castaway. Because here Jimmy Stewart's acting, and throughout the movie, there's this invisible rabbit, but you believe that he's talking. He's not, it doesn't feel awkward or weird. It feels very natural. Which I think is just, like I said, remarkable acting. He was nominated also for the Academy Awards, but he did not win. So, Britt, when we look at a movie, and we talked about this a little bit, in some ways it has a not nearly as dark a feel, but it felt a little bit like Leaving Las Vegas, because in the story, Elwood's an alcoholic. Like he goes to the bars every day and drinks significant amounts of alcohol, and even in the movie, they're going back and forth between the sanatorium and the bar.
He's always trying to get back. He's always trying to invite people back. Like
right. Yeah. He's like, that's the good thing about Charlie's. They're open late. But so you said sort of why you enjoy this movie, but when you're looking at it from a theme, what is it why should somebody go, and probably after listening to this, because unless you're a pretty serious movie buff, you may not have known about this movie. Like, I knew about it. I've watched it several times growing up.
Yeah. It was an incredibly popular movie back then, and even for a lot of us growing up, but it was difficult to find for free, right? It wasn't so popular nowadays that they have it on Netflix for free to try to get people to sign up, right? You got to rent it. The movie came out in 1950.
It is an 86 on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's legitimately a good movie.
Yeah, no, it's legitimately a great movie
per Rotten Tomatoes.
And like you said, the acting, the writing is amazing. But for me, the theme that gets me is that here you have a person who believes that an invisible being is with him at all times, and that this invisible being is bigger than him, and this invisible being is different than him, and this invisible being is not someone he can control, and this invisible being isn't trying to control him. And yet there's a marked difference between before he meets Harvey in his life, and they don't show this in the movie. By the time the movie starts, he already is walking around believing he sees Harvey. But in the movie they address it several times. Something changed in him. Something happened to him where he changed and he started to see Harvey. And then, of course, later on, Elwood describes that meeting, and he describes what it was like to meet Harvey. But to me, even though he's technically crazy, right? This is an example to us because the way that he acts with people and in life in general, to me, is very instructive for those of us who believe that God is with us at all times, who believe that we have a relationship with God. And if I have a relationship with God, I can't have a relationship with someone that I cannot see or hear or communicate with somehow. And that's what faith is. Faith is seeing the unseen. Faith is the ability to perceive and pursue what is unseen to us in the natural. And because what is unseen, the Bible says, created what was seen, what we see. So the unseen is more powerful. And so when you look at how Elwood behaves, we can go over some of the ways that he behaves with people. Like, this is how we should act if we believe God is with us all the time. Mm-hmm. And so just, that's why it's so instructive to me, because it makes him a kind person. It makes him a charming person. It makes him, all of these things are a result of his relationship with this really big rabbit.
Yeah. Yeah, I really, what you said when you were listing right there at the beginning, you were talking about how they interact. Elwood doesn't try to control Harvey. Harvey doesn't try to control Elwood. And that idea of relationship, if we're in a relationship with God, and God is always with us, God is in us, God is with us. Like, this is going to make me sound super weird, but a couple of years ago, I'd go golfing, and it's going to sound weird to call it a spiritual practice, but it was a spiritual practice. I was trying to learn how to enjoy golfing regardless of my score, regardless of how well I played.
Right.
And so I would be out on the course, I'd be by myself, but I'd be like, no, I'm golfing with God. And so there were times I might be on the tee box and I'd hit a good drive and I'd give out like 3 invisible fist bumps, right? For the Trinity. And it sounds silly, it sounds ridiculous, but I think I found it really helpful in a way. If the reality is God is always present, God is always with us, then sort of physically manifesting that. I've read a book about where somebody in their devotion sets up 2 chairs, one for him and one for God. And that's how they manifest the reality of the presence in a tangible sense, so that it makes it sort of an on-ramp, maybe a catalyst to experiencing the presence of God in a more tangible way. Because sometimes it is kind of ethereal. It's kind of difficult. It's like trying to grasp a cloud. You can't grab a cloud. So how are we going to realize the presence of God unless we sort of build ourselves some crutches in that way?
Yeah. Well, it's a discipline. It's a discipline because we have to be intentional, because he's not someone we see with our eyes, and we are more easily distracted by things that are immediate to us. So we have to be disciplined and intentional about being aware that God is with us. And that becomes easier as time goes on, but it is a discipline. One of my favorite books that I always recommend to people is a really old book by a monk. His name is Brother Lawrence, and it says Practicing the Presence of God. And you can probably get it for 50 cents or for free in a PDF nowadays. But all Brother Lawrence did as a monk at the monastery for I don't know how long, but he practiced the discipline of his awareness. So that was simply all he did. When I'm washing dishes, while I'm doing this job, while I'm here, while I'm there. And the transformation that brings in us is phenomenal, because we were not, I think Alan Arnold or, other people have said it, but we were not made to do things for God. We were created and definitely born again to do things with God together. And that's what you see in this movie. You see that Elwood and Harvey are doing things together. He asks Harvey, "Where do you want to go? You want to go have a drink or what?"
You want to sit at the bar or at the booth?
Would you like the booth? I think we'll have the booth. And he's talking with this person as if he is real. And
whoa! Hang on! I love what you just said. He's talking to this person as if he's real.
Right.
And again, and I'm with you with the book, Practicing the Presence of God. If you haven't read it, I'll put a link for it. Go get it. It's super cheap, super easy to read, short, little. Yeah. Like it's great for a devotional.
Yeah.
But applying that concept to like a prayer life, the talking to God as if he were real, as if he were sitting at the bar next to you. Like how does that shift your approach in your interaction with God?
It begins with the fact that I'm never alone. And because he is real, I get the benefit of that presence. I feel free. I feel satisfied. I feel loved, right? I experience the benefit of that awareness. Because so often we don't, even though our feelings are not the foundation of truth, we often don't feel like God is with us. We often don't feel like he is near, and because we get so distracted, because we get, hard times come, and it's sometimes very difficult to hear from God. And I was saying this the other day on a podcast. I said, man, the most important thing I can teach anybody is how to hear the voice of God. That's it. I mean, like this is the core of everything. Like hearing the voice of God is why we have a Bible. Like we don't have a Bible unless somebody hears from God and writes it down, right? I mean, like we don't have anything unless God reveals himself. And practicing that discipline of that relationship what happens is, and because I then feel loved and I feel satisfied and I feel the intimacy that I long for,
Mm-hmm.
now I can be a blessing to others. Now I can also know, because God's with me and I'm practicing that awareness. Now when I have a conversation with someone, I can say, God, what's going on here? And there's that moment in the movie where I can't remember who he was talking to, but he's like, yeah, Harvey told me that my neighbor, someone was going to come and visit the neighbor tomorrow and blah, 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 blah. Like it was a normal thing. Like Harvey told me this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, wait, did it happen? He goes, oh, yeah. like I'm hanging out with somebody who can stop a clock. I'm hanging out with somebody who can stop time, and things can happen while the world is stopped around me. And yet there's value. Like, and because of that, I can also be completely engaged with the people I'm sitting with, which Elwood does. He never forgets that Harvey's there. He never hides that Harvey is there. He never forgets that Harvey is there, which I also love. He is always trying to introduce people to Harvey.
Right.
like if we really believed God was there, wouldn't we try to introduce people to him? Like, this guy is awesome. Like, wouldn't we be like, hey, look, you are so wonderful and I'm really enjoying this conversation, but can I just introduce you to, he's sitting right here,
Right.
What I love about the movie is he's not unaware of the world around him. He just sees it differently. He's not unaware of people, right? He's not like completely clueless. He just sees the world differently. And so then when he deals with people, even people who are trying to lock him up.
Right.
Well, I'd like to go with you, but she's really trying to give me a bath.
She told me she needed to give me a bath. I would love to come with you. He said he's going to give me a manicure. So
like he's like, and even when there's like, there was toward the end of the movie where there's this little bit of conflict in a conversation. He goes, well, look at that conflict. Conflict's great. It means people care. And like, he sees the world differently because he is aware that there is a magical being with him at all times. And because of that, that gives him the freedom to be kind, to be pleasant, to encourage people. And, like the fact that he's able to see Miss Kelly's value, the nurse from the from the sanitarium, and his continual seeing of her value and expressing her value changes Dr. Sanderson's heart from, I know you just try to.
Where does egotistical arrogance begin?
He calls her names, and he's like accusing her of things, and he's short with her, and yet
it's a very 1950s movie.
Oh, very much so. And yet, because Elwood is like, I just love the way. Will you say that again? I love the way you say that. And then Sanderson goes,
"War on."
Me too. Like, just those moments that his kindness changes the situation. His kindness changes the atmosphere, and it's all due to this change that happened with Harvey.
So everybody keeps getting afraid that Elwood's running off. They're chasing him down. He's like, I'm just out for a walk. Just thought it sounded nice. He's very present, very purposeful, very intentional, very focused on others. And so he's talking, and like you said, the doctor and Kelly were dancing, and he's like, oh, you were lovely. I used to dance, but now I don't have the time. And so that's when the Miss Kelly says, well, what is it that you do? And then he explains what he does, which I think is a pretty good, as we've been discussing, the way that he acts sort of reflects the way that we should be acting and interacting as Christians, as followers of Jesus, as people who practice the presence of God should act on a daily basis?
I don't know. I just don't seem to have any time anymore. I have so many things to do.
What is it you do, Mr. Dad?
Oh, Harvey and I sit on the bars and have a drink or two, play the jukebox. And soon the faces of all the other people, they turn toward mine and they smile. And they're saying, we don't know your name, mister, but you're a very nice fellow. Harvey and I warm ourselves in all these golden moments. You know, we've entered as strangers. Soon we have friends, and they come over and they sit with us, they drink with us, they talk to us. They tell about the big, terrible things they've done and the big, wonderful things they'll do. Their hopes and their regrets, their loves and their hates, all very large, because nobody ever brings anything small into a bar.
Beautiful. So part of the movie is that his sister, Vita, and his niece, Myrtle May, they are
Another
trying to...
50s name.
Well, her name is Vita Louise or something. They both have these names. They're trying to make it in society. They're trying to be successful in high society. And Myrtle May makes a statement at one point. She says, "Why can't we live like other people?" And here's the thing. When you see the invisible, and the invisible is real to you, and you act like it's real to you, then you don't live like other people. That's the truth. That's the way it is. And it disrupts what normal life is. It disrupts those expectations of, and it changes your goals. And we'll get to maybe one of those quotes later for Elwood, but it changes their goals. Their goal for, Vita and Myrtle May, their goal is to make it, to get, for her to get married, for Myrtle, the young woman, the young niece, for her to get married and find the right guy in society and be taken care of and all of this stuff. And I'm saying all this, that to say that it's that for Elwood, his goal is different. His goal is to make friends with the forgotten, with the marginalized, with the broken. These are my words, but from that clip, his goal, and is he an alcoholic? Probably. Because they even make that. They say the word early on, or towards the middle, where he looks up the definition of a puka, and a puka is there's like a fairy creature and blah 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 blah, and particularly attracted to crackpots and rum pots. I had to look up what a rum pot is. That's an old word. Crackpot I know, but rum pot means an alcoholic, right? It means someone who's likes rum, right? And God is attracted, maybe not to alcoholics necessarily, but he's attracted to the misfits. He's attracted to the people who already see the world a little differently. And so Harvey is as well. And so because of that, Elwood isn't trying to make it in high society. And Vita says it later. You could have been anything. You could have had a job with I don't even know what she meant, like some council or something. You could have been anything. But instead, you just go to the bar and you hang out with people and you invite people to dinner, and they're people they don't like. And that's something about Jesus that is very important. Jesus didn't seek out people that could further his career. That's not who he sought. He wasn't seeking after someone that he could get something out of because he didn't need anything out of them. He was already completely content and fulfilled within himself. And that's what we see with Elwood. We were talking about it before the show, but one of the patterns in the movie is when people say, "Can I help you?" And he says, "What did you have in mind?"
What did you have in mind? Yeah.
And what I love about that response is, if you want to help me, then it's up to you what you want to do. I don't need you to help me. I have Harvey. Right. Harvey and I both, and that's kind of where the movie ends. I prefer you too. We prefer each other's company.
Even that one guy who's leaving the bar, and he's like, "Hey, you forgot to pay your tab." The guy at the end said he'd get it, thinking, kind of preying on this guy's imaginary friend.
Right.
And Elwood just like, "Oh yeah, we're good. We got it."
Yeah. No, he will get it. He's got you. But even in that conversation in the alley, if you look at it, he doesn't say, "People come up to me and talk to me. People sit down with us." And do we really, I'm not saying I even believe it most of the time, but do we really believe that when somebody comes and has a conversation with me, they're not just having a conversation with me? If the Holy Spirit lives in me, I mean, this could either it's just hyperbole and nonsense, or it's real, right? That the Holy Spirit lives within me, that God is with me, that he's anointed me, he's gifted me, that he is immortal, and he is all these things the Bible says that he is, and he's right here with me. And so that when people come up and talk to me, they're not just talking to me. They're talking to us together. And I love that. What did you have in mind? And he's always happy. Like, really, you want to help me? Like he's touched that someone would want to help him. There's so many of those moments that I enjoy in the movie that kind of convict me, not in a bad way, but in like one of those like I wish and you see that in the movie too. People wish they were like him. People are almost jealous of him.
That's what he says in the alleyway, where he said, "These people come in and they're strangers. Then when they leave, they're friends. We're warmed by the fire of these golden moments."
Yeah. And then they don't come back because they're envious. And he goes, that's just too bad. They don't understand. Even though they appreciated it, even though it blessed them, even though it encouraged them, something about it was different and not normal.
One of the things, in this day and age of divisiveness and, whoever screams the loudest wins the argument, basically, this model that he gives in this movie of agreeableness and the word that he would use was pleasant. And we're going to play a clip here, but to set that up, he's having a conversation with Dr. Chumley, and he had just shared, Harvey can stop the clock. We can go anywhere we want and come back and no time will have passed. And Dr. Chumley's like, "Well, where have you gone?" He's like, "Nowhere. I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be than right where I am." I found that that's the most enjoyable time. I'm enjoying this conversation with you. And it's that in a relationship, it's not what the other person can do for you that builds it's not a good foundation for a relationship.
Right.
But what's good is I just, like you had mentioned earlier, I prefer your company. And so he gets ready to leave Dr. Chumley's office. Dr. Chumley's the guy who runs the sanatorium. And he's like, "Oh, I've got to go say goodbye to my friends." These people that he just met, and he's inviting everybody to dinner. It's the taxi driver. It's the ex-con. It's the guy who runs the gate at the insane asylum. He's like, "Oh, will you join me for dinner?" He's like, "Oh, I'd love to." When? And that's so disruptive.
Yeah.
To just be, like you said, "Can I help you? What did you have in mind?" Or it's just the same thing. "Oh, I'd love to get together." When? And they're taken aback when he says those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, I've got to go talk to my friends. I've got to say goodbye to them before I leave. And Dr. Chumley says, these people aren't your friends. This is all this and this. But I love the question that they get to. Where is your righteous indignation?
Mm-hmm.
And because I think that we, Christians, believers, followers of Jesus, whatever phrase, term you want to use, we spend too much time with righteous indignation and not enough time loving one another.
Excuse me, Doctor. I want to say goodbye to some of my friends before I leave.
Mr. Dowd, none of those people are your friends, but I want you to know that I am your friend.
Well, thank you, Doctor, and I'm yours.
They underestimate you, as I did. This sister of yours is at the bottom of a conspiracy against you. She's trying to persuade me to lock you up. Today she had commitment papers drawn up. She has your power of attorney and the key to your safety box, and she brought you here.
My sister did all that in one afternoon. That Vita certainly is a whirlwind, isn't she?
Good heavens, man, haven't you any righteous indignation?
Oh, Doctor, you know, years ago, my mother used to say to me, she'd say, in this world, Elwood, you must be, she always called me Elwood. In this world, Elwood, you must be oh so smart or oh so pleasant. Well, for years I was smart. I recommend pleasant. You may quote me.
It's one of the best quotes of any movie of all time. Where's your righteous indignation? She's trying to lock you up. Man, she's been busy, man. Look, good for her.
Vita,
like,
she's such a whirlwind.
But if you are aware of the invisible, you also know that your real enemy isn't other people. Now, this is Christianity. Now, they don't really say this in the movie, but when you realize the invisible is real and miraculous things happen, which is another part of that conversation, when you realize miraculous things are happening and can happen, then it kind of puts you at peace, like he is. It kind of puts you like, I don't have to put other people down. I don't have to, and even though he's honest, he's like, Vita doesn't like Harvey. And isn't that too bad? Like, I don't understand. Like, sometimes we don't understand. People are introduced to Jesus and they reject him. I don't get that. I like being with this guy. I love hanging out with Jesus. I love the awareness and the vision and the love and the just how much bigger my life is, even though my life hasn't technically changed, but just being with him has changed the way I look at everything. And why wouldn't anybody else want that? Right. And so you get those sort of things with him, but he's not putting her down. He's just, he's honest, but he's saying, man, that's just too bad. I really wish that she would change, and enjoy him like I enjoy him. And, one of my favorite moments was early in the movie. So the first scene in the movie, they try to get rid of Elwood because they're having a big society party. And he's at the bar and he reads and they even have the judge send somebody to keep him at the bar. And something happens with the dude and he gets in an accident or something. And such a 50s movie, such a 40s and 50s movie, man.
Right.
And so he reads in the paper, someone's like, hey, your sister's having a party. So he's like, oh, so he goes back and I guess it's his aunt or somebody is there from high society. And as he's talking with her, he says, look, I've noticed that you're disturbed. I can see you're disturbed about Harvey. Because he introduces Harvey to this woman with furs on, and she's all rich and wealthy, and she's the person that they want to impress, that Vita and Myrtle may want to impress. And he goes,
she has a marriageable nephew.
She has a marriageable nephew. And he sees her react. Again, he's not unaware of what's happening. He just sees it differently. And he says, I can see you're disturbed about Harvey, but he likes you very much. And it's like, well, that doesn't help her. Like, that doesn't make it. But again, like it's like, okay, I get it. Jesus being real is a disturbing reality. It is disturbing on a number of different levels, right? The unseen is like, you can see stuff and hear stuff that I don't see and hear. Like, that's just craziness, right?
Right.
And yet I can't explain why you act this way. And then of course we get to the end of the movie and the kind of the conclusion, which I love, but I love the fact that he's like, look, I know it's disturbing, but he actually likes you. Don't be disturbed. You know, how many times does an angel show up in the Bible? It's like, no, don't be afraid, because they're freaking out. They're dropping to the ground. They're hiding their face. They're like, coming into contact with heaven is a disturbing moment. It's not a peaceful moment, even though they say, peace be with you. We need that revelation from heaven, because that's reality. That is reality. That's more real than what we see. And it's love for God to disturb us. And unfortunately, we don't need to go a lot on this, but unfortunately, we are a part of a culture that increasingly is fine with the idea of a lie as long as it makes them feel good. They are fine with the fact that what I am experiencing isn't real, and I know it's not real, but at least it makes me feel good. And that's death. That's a problem. And yet our modern culture does not feel that it's a problem. They feel that it's okay. It's actually good.
Yeah, I think that, and that takes us towards our last clip where the taxi driver comes in, because they come in, Elwood agrees to get the shot that will basically turn him into a normal human being and they're like, oh, you'll never see Harvey again. And he's sad about that. He's like, oh, well, Vita, if that's what you want, if you want it this much, I will be glad to do it. And then they have a conversation with the taxi driver. You know, the taxi driver's like, no, I need my money now for coming out here. And so they get it. They pull out Elwood because she misplaces her coin purse, the whole thing. And she asks him, she's like, why were you so adamant about getting paid now versus after we drive back? Because what you said, there's a tension, there's a resistance, there's a difference between a person who is like Elwood and a person who is, quote unquote, a normal human being.
A sweet guy.
Certainly. You could just as well have waited.
Ah, no. Listen, lady, I've been driving this route for 15 years. I brought them out here to get that stuff, and I drove them home after they had it. It changes them.
Well, I certainly hope so.
You ain't kidding. On the way out here, they sit back and enjoy the ride. They talk to me. Sometimes we stop and watch the sunsets and look at the birds flying. Sometimes we stop and watch the birds when there ain't no birds and look at the sunsets when it's raining. We have a swell time. And I always get a big tip. But afterwards,
Afterwards? Oh. What do you mean, afterwards? Oh.
Hey, crab. They yell at me. Watch the lights. Watch the brakes. Watch the intersections. They scream at me to hurry. They got no faith in me and my buggy. Yet, it's the same cab, same driver, and we're going back over the very same road. It's no fun. And no tips.
My brother would have tipped you anyway. He's very generous. He always has been.
Not after this, he won't be. After this, he'll be a perfectly normal human being. And you know what stinkers they are.
They literally say this shot is going to shock him back to reality. And for the purposes of our discussion, reality is not seeing what is invisible. That's what they mean by that. We're going to shock him back to reality because this is so disruptive. This is so strange. This is so weird.
You're making my life uncomfortable because you're weird.
The whole idea is that if he comes back to not seeing what is unseen, then what's going to happen is he's going to look for his satisfaction in every moment, and it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be good enough for him. Nothing's going to be good enough for him. And of course, the way he expresses it, the taxi driver, is he's going to crab, yell at me and stop there and do this. But you know what all that's based on? Fear. That's control based on fear. We try to control the situation based on fear. And so we yell at people and we call them names and we put them down and we do. But when you're hanging out with a magical creature that can stop clocks and will literally organize every situation to help you, which is another part of the movie, right? Harvey hid her coin purse so that she would have to go to talk to Elwood. And there's these moments in the movie where Harvey is manipulating things behind the scenes.
He writes something in the encyclopedia.
And that's who God is too. That's why Elwood is so agreeable. He knows Harvey's got his back. He knows Harvey's going to look out for him. And he has a magical being who can stop clocks and do all this stuff looking out for him. So he's like, okay, sure, I'll go with you.
Yeah.
Knowing that Harvey can change it all in a second. And all of this encourages me, convicts me, challenges me as a Christian to think, shouldn't I be the same way? Shouldn't I be like this? And what I love as a conclusion at the end of the movie is we would rather have him be kind and pleasant as he is and believe in something that seems pretty strange to us and disturbing, but we'd rather have that guy than someone who doesn't see him. And wouldn't it be great if the world felt that way too? Like, even if they don't believe, we'd rather you believe and act like this. We'd rather you believe and be nice and be generous and go out of the way to deal with the broken and the hurting and invite those people to dinner and not try to seek out high society and people who are good for our careers, but try to just give to people and hear their horrible stories and encourage them in the awesome, wonderful futures that they believe that they could have. And because no one takes anything small into a bar. But he goes out of his way to those places. Like, what if the church was like that? What if we did that? What if we went out of the way to encounter people where they were and dealt with their pain and and then encourage them that, see this magical creature? He just wants to sit and talk with you too.
Yeah.
He just wants a relationship with you too. Let me introduce you. And I think those parts of the movie are beautiful to me.
Well, I read in Matthew 9 today when Jesus calls Matthew, and I'm reading from the Message, and it says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Later, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to his home as dinner guests, along with many tax collectors and other disreputable sinners. But when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with such scum? I remember I heard a preacher once say, Jesus doesn't need us to defend him.
Nope.
He's our defender. I saw, was it Demi Lovato's poster it's taken down because it ascribes to a curse word, and it's got her laying on a mattress shaped like a cross, and it's offensive to Christians. And I think like Elwood would be sad. Like, he's like, oh, I wish they didn't feel this way. I wish that didn't happen. But the outrage, the being smart,
the righteous indignation,
I don't know that that's what we're really called to do. We're called to eat with disreputable sinners, to eat with such scum, to go to the people who don't feel heard to be warmed by the fire of those friendships, of those golden moments. Paul says that we're to be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And if I look at the news, if I look at the people that seem to, dominate social media, there's not a lot of hope, even in the believers, especially in the believers who should have hope, who maybe should act like there's a big white rabbit that's a 6-foot rabbit that's walking along beside them. And practicing the presence of God, I think, will help us to do that, to help the people who need help. Because that's what Jesus said is like, I didn't come for the healthy, I came for the sick. What he says, for I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners. So I guess the action items as you leave is to, what would it be like to walk around as if God was in your hip pocket? To engage with the world around you, to embrace being pleasant and agreeable. I mean, that's a discipline. It talks about crucifying the desires of the flesh, and like anger is one of them, like hatred is one of them, divisiveness. And so many times, this is how they will know you are my disciples, that you love one another. In the Sermon on the Mount, anyone can be nice to their friends, but I'm telling you to love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. What would that look like? What sort of transformation would that bring to the world if, you want to lock me up? Okay. I got a 6-foot rabbit in my pocket.
Like you said, like the only way we are able to bless those who curse us is if we realize we have this amazingly all-powerful being who has promised it's all going to work out. And he never says that, but you get that sense from Elwood in the movie. Like, okay, I'm gonna agree with this. I'm going to go along with whatever's happening in the moment and be in the moment, even when people are trying to hurt me. I'm just going to go along because God has my back. I don't have to fight even for myself,
right?
Because I really believe I belong to Him. And I don't need to have righteous indignation. It doesn't mean I need to go out and buy whoever this pop artist. I don't need to go buy her album. I don't need to, but does it mean I need to have moral outrage when the world is going to act like the world? It's going to do it.
Right.
People being sinners never surprised Jesus. It should never surprise us. But we're not called to tell them they're sinners necessarily. We're called to invite them. And one of my favorite stories, too, is along the same lines is when Peter is given the vision in Acts of the unclean, and God says, partake. And he's like, that's unclean. And then he next gets this is not about food. Like, thank God I'm a Gentile and I can eat bacon. Maybe I'll have some tonight. But the point wasn't food. The point is what is actually eternal, which is people. People matter. And he's like, don't call what I've called clean, don't call it unclean. And he then gets an invitation to the centurion's house. And when the centurion hears that Peter's coming, he invites all his friends.
Yeah.
Man. And what I love about it, and we've already talked about it, but it's not just that God is in my hip pocket, but that He's with me, and I prefer His relationship. And I'd rather have Him with me than not. And it's the same with Him. He would rather be with me than not. And when we're in that secure place, man, we can love people. We can just love people. And we're not looking for stuff from people. We realize, man, the King, He's already my dad. Like,
yeah.
What do I need from you? And it challenges me to remember and to be more disciplined about that awareness, because He really does prefer to be with me. And it makes me happy too.
So this has been Paul McDonald and Britt Mooney talking about Harvey. I'm going to play this last clip as our closing to just say, when you're fighting, when you're wondering what to do and what's real, remember that, I don't know, there's this there's a scene where they talk about facing reality. And I think we frequently choose to face the world around us and choose to ignore the reality, but we can face reality by embracing and practicing the presence of God on a daily, hourly, minutely basis. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Well, and now, won't you join me? Oh, Mr. Down, I'm afraid we can't do this. The situation has changed since this afternoon, but I urge you to have no resentment. Dr. Chumley is your friend, and he only wants to help you.
Isn't that nice of him? I'd be very glad to help him.
You know, we all must face reality, Dowd, sooner or later.
Well, I wrestled with reality for 35 years, Doctor, and I'm happy to state I finally won out over it.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?